Welcome to the RedMed podcast, Rescue, Expedition and Disaster Medicine, where we provide a platform for healthcare professionals working in or aspiring to join rescue, expedition and disaster response teams. A platform to share information, advice and opportunities and connect like-minded RedMed individuals in our community. Welcome everybody to the first episode of the RedMed podcast, where we discuss rescue, expedition and disaster medicine. I'm joined here by Chris Sharp, our crew chief at SOS and RedMed. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
It's good to be here. Eventually, we've been mulling this over, drank lots of cups of tea and coffee, trying to decide how we'd launch this, and we decided to do what we normally do, and that is cuff it
and drink tea and talk.
So it should flow okay. Well, just to add a little bit of context as to who we are and where we're going with this, Chris and I work with SOS Medical Services in Guatemala. We're the directors of SOS and Heli SOS, an air ambulance and search and rescue unit in Guatemala. I'm the director of the company, served 14 years in the British Army, then went back out to the Middle East as a contractor, working as a paramedic for embassies, oil rigs, etc., doing a bit of primary care, emergency care. I've led expeditions around Europe, around Central America, climbed Orizaba, Aconcagua. I'm passionate about mountaineering, especially in cold places. I'm commando, Arctic warfare trained, a fellow of the Academy of Wilderness Medicine, and really that's where my passion is. I love being on the helicopters, I love being on critical care ambulances, but my passion has been out in the wilderness and with like-minded people.
I'm the other Chris. I fortunately prefer to fly over the mountains. I was been flying 28 years. I've just topped 15,000 hours. I'm on about 6,000 rescues. I'm the chief air crewman for the Heli SOS project and the lead flight paramedic overseeing the local guys that we employ and subsequently all their training towards international standards of operation. I love any country, but I've now settled in Guatemala. My hobbies include survival training because knowledge weighs nothing, as a mantra that I picked up. And like I say with Chris, we've been talking about this for a while, and the aim is to put some of our experience, which is globally, across to those who potentially want to kind of go in this direction.
Fantastic. Yeah, Chris and I met about 10 years ago on a paramedic course, a wilderness first responder course in Guatemala. Since then, we've trained the British military, established the training wing in SOS, and now we've taken the first National Association of EMTs chapter forward in Guatemala. We're delivering tech courses, TCCC, PHTLS, all hazards disaster response, and AMLS courses, all of which are improving standards in the pre-hospital environment in Guatemala. So that's really where our passion lies, as well as helping underserved communities. So this podcast is supported by SOS Coffee. It's gourmet Guatemalan coffee, produced by Guatemalans in Guatemala, sold to Guatemalans, and we use the proceeds to go back into the community. Recently, we've done free CPR courses and bleeding control courses for hundreds of citizens around Guatemala. And we also use it to buy medicines and kit to go out and do medical missions and clinics in remote areas, in some cases where people haven't seen doctors in decades. So to everyone out there that's attended the courses and bought the coffee, thanks very much. I'm enjoying SOS Coffee now. If you guys want to buy some, you can hit us up on the website or the podcast or on YouTube and we'll get in touch. Chris is obviously drinking tea because he's still got his English roots.
It makes you strong.
Quality. So it's really a huge field. I mean, where do we start with RedMed, rescue, expedition and disaster? We're probably going to overlap a little bit into wilderness medicine, and there's an overlap in the terminology anyway. Tactical medicine, and my favourite at the moment, the trifecta, using the same helicopter and the same crew for both critical care transports, air ambulance and search and rescue, which really only happens in underserved communities and under-resourced services. So it's a huge melting pot. There's lots of ingredients, and I guess, where do we start? What is RedMed?
I think to start, you really need to first look at the differences between if we say traditional pre-hospital medicine, and, for example, medicine where we are today in the middle of a monsoon, what are the key differences when you're out on your own, either on an expedition, I kick you out of a helicopter on a winch, a hoist, a short haul, whatever. What are the differences? Because people can be quickly out of their place. Because, I have a saying for doctors belong inside with bright lights. Not all. Some paramedics do, because they're in the comfort zone in the ambulance, which, for example, the United States and Europe are greatly advanced to what we have here. But then when you take that comfort zone away from somebody, and the physics of you actually have to carry these things, this is where you coin the term red med. It is a different discipline as such that encompasses all the traditional skills using gaffer tape.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of MacGyver potentially. Adapted, requires more initiative. All right, so we've got the pre-hospital environment, the hospital environment, and then the red med environment is taking those subject matter experts, some of which may come from the hospital. A lot of them will have experience in the pre-hospital environment. It's probably easier to translate across. But then putting the knowledge and skills potentially out of the comfort zone if people haven't been involved in this environment or haven't had the training, and then adapt into a dynamic environment, a limited resource environment. We've always said, what's the difference between the pre-hospital environment in an ambulance and the pre-hospital environment in a tactical environment? It's very similar. Maybe limited light, maybe less equipment, maybe more pressure, maybe you're understaffed, there's only one medic on the team, you might have multiple casualties.
And you also, if you think time, in the street setting, it's time, you've got response times, time on scene, and you can have the extremes, as you know. You can either have, you've got very little time due to the scenario that you're faced with, or you're in an extended patient care, which takes you way beyond what is your normal scope of practice. But, for example, Guatemala, it's now monsoon, we can't come and pick you up, so you may there be for an extended 72-hour period.
Or interestingly, we just took a phone call 5 minutes before this podcast, and we've sent the air ambulance to go and pick up a a victim of a myocardial infarction, heart attack, and now it's chucking it down with rain. Hopefully they're going to find a way to get back to us, but if not,
they're going to be stuck in the middle of nowhere
doing ACLS or prolonged field care, trying to improvise and use our plan B and ground transport to get back.
So it's the time and resources, I think, are the big issue, and then the ability. A lot of it, to me, is planning and preparation. The 5 Ps. I'm not repeating because it's a podcast, but prevent bad performance. Everything, to me, that involves rescue, expedition or disaster, we don't need any more dead heroes. Everything can be pre-planned, pretty much. There's obviously the Murphy factor, the fudge factor, but proper planning, looking forward, risk management, all the words that I used to hate that you used to tell me, that they all do apply. And if you think of any eventuality, you can't obviously equip for that, because you've still got, like when we run a wilderness course, pick a wilderness med kit, then half it and then half it, because you've still got to have room for your own food, your own water, or else
you've got to carry it and not be tired at the end of the day.
Yourself.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. For me, whether you integrate as a medical professional into a rescue team, or you're the team medic on an expedition, or you deploy the disaster management team, apart from navigation, communications, prolonged field care, wilderness medicine, the differences in the epidemiology and the different environments, the biggest thing people need to consider first is they need to be able to look after themselves in that environment. They've got to be self-sufficient. If you're not accustomed to that environment, all of a sudden you've got athlete's foot, you've got blisters, and you can't keep up with the group, you become a casualty yourself, and you can't help the group. If you can't carry the weight of your rucksack and you become fatigued or dehydrated, it affects your decision making. And then the group's got to carry the medical professional. Equally, the situation's so dynamic, you might find yourself alone. You might get separated from the group. So you've got to be able to survive. You've got to be able to navigate. You've got to be able to set up communications. And ultimately, we'll talk about roles and responsibilities in each of the different spheres later on. But prevention's better than cure. Preventative medicine is key. So whilst we integrate into these teams, and we may already be responding to disasters and casualties, in a lot of cases we're just accompanying a rescue team or an expedition team, and we want to prevent problems rather than deal with them.
And it's also, we get a lot of guys here for the helicopters, I want to rappel, I want to short haul, I want to do all these things, but I'm going to put you at 10,000 feet in the middle of a jungle on the side of a volcano. I need to know that I'm not creating more casualties. Can you physically look after yourself? Thinking back to the hierarchy of rescue, the rescuer should never need rescuing, the golden rule. Can you look after yourself? Then do you have the skills to look after your patient, possibly for an extended period of time? The rescue we did 3 years ago with the missing tourists that we found, the possibility of you being stuck on the side of a volcano
Was high.
was very high
Yeah.
for at least 3 days.
Yeah.
And can you trust me as a crew chief? Can I trust to put you in the first place, or else am I negligent? I know we don't have that kind of laws here as such, but I would be negligent. And to be honest, the medic, as in this case it was you would be negligent to do it in the first place.
Because then I put the remainder of the team at risk if they have to come in to get me.
And you're putting us at risk to put essentially a non-competent person on the side,
Yeah.
just for the benefit of a rescue. Whereas, is that risk worth it? So a lot of it is risk management.
There's a lot of risk management. I mean, more and more popular expeditions are more and more popular these days, more accessible. There's a lot of charity expeditions. Guys can sign up at the drop of a hat. People may or may not be experienced in the expedition environment. They may or may not be fit enough. So the expedition medics, paramedics, doctors, offshore medics, nurses may face more challenges. So this is where they need to do the homework. And we've got a whole podcast episode on this about the pre-planning, doing medical questionnaires and follow-ups with clients prior to deploying to make sure that people are able and equipped mentally, psychologically, and they've got the equipment and the medicines to manage their own conditions so they don't become a drain on the healthcare professional.
When you talk expeditions, you can also include your extreme sports. Like Guatemala here, you've got extreme mountain biking, kayaking, rafting,
paragliding.
where they do take, I use a medic in commas, probably a first aider in international standards, totally ill-equipped, totally ill-trained to support a family group that they know no previous medical history. Obviously Max, who will probably feature later, he rang me up the other day. He said, I've got a client, they've got this problem, this is the time we're coming out. So at least I know what river they're in. But he is one of the few that asks people, do you have any medical conditions?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas you'll get a local whoever with a big bag of bandages, probably a spinal board, a C-collar, that's totally the wrong equipment for what they're doing. They slow everybody down. They normally do it in uniform. So on a day like this, they're in thick cotton overalls, no communications with everybody. And because they carry that much kit, they then become the problem rather than assisting in the cure.
And I think a lot of it is